Hello and welcome to the second side of our perspective Bellringer page. Today we are going to get started on practicing windows, and to begin we need to give ourselves 2 to 3 buildings that we can add windows to. Now this is a follow along, so if you are ready, let's grab our rulers, and remember that this front line represents the corner closest to us on the building closest to us. Now our first step is to find the top of the leading edge and connect the top of the leading edge to both vanishing points. Let's go ahead and do that together. We're going to draw nice and lightly here so that we can erase the lines when necessary. Now let's connect the bottom of our leading edge to both vanishing points. So our first step is always to connect the top of the leading edge. The next step is to connect the bottom of the leading edge to both of our vanishing points. Here we go. All right, our next step is to decide our sides. Now let's take our ruler and we're gonna set the whole ruler on the right-hand side of the leading edge, and let's use that to help us draw this first side. Now let's place our ruler so that we have 1/2 inch line resting right on our leading edge, and let's use that to help us draw this side to be the same as each other's. Now we are going to erase the top line leading back to the vanishing point, but not our bottom line. We need that, and that's the bottom line. Oh geez. Now we are going to connect our corners to the opposite side's vanishing point. So let's begin with our left corner, and this is like an open book, right? Here's our spine, here's the open book cover. Now we're gonna find that top left corner. We're going to connect that to the right side vanishing point. And you don't need to draw these lines all the way since we have to erase them afterwards anyway. Now let's find the right hand corner of our open book, and we're going to connect it to the opposite side to the left. And remember that you only need to draw this line until it touches your first line. Now let's erase that last extra little bit. There we go. Now let's add in 2 more buildings. So we're gonna start by using our ruler to overlap with the lines we've already made, and you get to decide where you want your next front corner to be. So here is my next front corner. I just chose a random measurement, it doesn't really matter. And because this line is going above our horizon line, we will not see the roof because it's above our eye line. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to connect the top of our leading edge to both vanishing points. And we don't need to draw it all the way. We're drawing nice and lightly so that we can erase. Now we're going to connect the bottom of our leading edge to both vanishing points. But because this building is our closest one to us, this one, we only need to draw that line until it hits that first one, because this first one is in front of everything else. So we've connected the top and the bottom. Our next step is to decide our sides. And for this one, you can choose any measurement, but you do need to overlap with your ruler to make sure that your lines are nice and straight. And then we can erase the extra top lines. Now let's give ourselves 1 more building. We're gonna give ourselves another leading edge, and this one can be behind our first one. We're gonna draw that line leading up. Here's our first leading edge. Now let's connect the top to both vanishing points. And then we're going to look, and we realize we don't have the bottom of our leading edge to connect the bottom, so we don't have to. Now the next step, since we're skipping that next one, is to decide our sides. So let's overlap our ruler to make sure it's nice and straight with the other lines in our drawing. And there's our third building. Now, for our first window practice, what we are going to do is draw 2 large windows. So we are going to give ourselves the space where those windows will belong. Now, what we need to know about drawing things in perspective is that we have always straight up and down lines or lines leading to the vanishing point for the side that they are on. Now we are going to draw the side of our windows first. So what we're going to do, take your ruler so that we have that first row of squares, just 1 row of squares, and that's called 1/8 of an inch. We are going to add in our straight up and down line. And then we're going to add another one, and we want the gap, see how this has a width of 1 square? We want this next gap to be even skinnier. We want it to look even smaller because it's getting closer as it's getting towards us. So we've got 2 lines on either side of the front of this building. Now let's make the top and bottom edges of the windows. So we are going to just hop over here, and we're going to connect from the top of this edge to the vanishing point on that side. And then let's draw down to this edge. Now here's the side of our building with a window space. Let's go ahead and find the center of this space. And you would think to yourself like, well, I could find halfway and that would count. But in perspective, when you have something that's split evenly in half, and then you tilt it so one side is closer to you, it changes the distance, and it is not halfway where you think it might be. So we're going to start by connecting these corners to the opposite side corner, a diagonal line. Let's go ahead and do that together. And we're going to connect the other opposite sides corners to create this diagonal line. Now the middle of this X is right where the center is. So let's just add this little mark, and I'm going to give myself 2 lines here, just right in the center, and I'm going to make sure they're nice and straight compared to the others. And then I'm going to erase the diagonal lines and the lines between those spaces. And now my building has 2 large windows. Ta-da! All right. Now that's our first type of window. Let's do that same type of window on the left side of this box. Now we are going to start by drawing our vertical lines nice and straight, and let's overlap with our ruler to make sure that we can catch a straight line. And let's draw the back of that window wherever you'd like it to be. But we want straight lines. Now to draw the top and bottom edge of the window, we need to line it up with this vanishing point, the vanishing point on that same side. And there are our box windows. That's what this is called. So let's label that a box window. Now what we're going to do next is a row window. So when you see like big buildings that have a lot of windows, then that's kind of what we're thinking about for this one. And we're going to come in and right on this line here, we're going to draw a mark at every row of these little boxes, the 1/8 marks. And we're going to go all the way down the middle of this building. And we're going to measure all the way down. We just want this to be nice and consistent with the measurements, and we want it right in the middle. Now we're going to take that mark for each of those lines we made, and we're going to line it up with the vanishing point. So we're just going along, adding these lines, and make sure that you're not getting off of your vanishing point. Sometimes you scoot your ruler and it moves it from the main part that you're kind of rotating around. So make sure that you still are right on top of that vanishing point as you move down the windows. So we're just adding these lines with that same measurement. And we're putting our ruler just slightly underneath those lines so that when we draw our lines, it lines up right with that mark rather than slightly above. And don't forget to check to make sure that your ruler stays right on that vanishing point. Okay, now there's our first side. We are going to hop over to the other side and do the exact same thing from the exact same measurements. So we're going to just line these marks up with the left side vanishing point now. We're going to go through, give ourselves all of these rows, and we want them to be nice and lined up. So try to get your ruler to be just slightly beneath that mark, so when you do make the mark, it ends up right on that edge, right on the line we made. Now, once we've got these little rows done, you have the option to go through and fill in alternating rows. So I would just go through and I'm just going to very carefully fill in alternating rows so that it goes dark windows, light windows, dark windows, light windows. So we'll just take a moment, go through and fill in this shading. And if you don't get the shading all the way done, that's okay. I mostly just wanted to give you a chance to get caught up if you needed a little bit more time. So if you get to this, that's great. If you don't get to filling your rows, that's all right too. All right, now we are going to continue with one more style of windows, and we're gonna do the same technique that we did for our row windows. And let's add a little title, row windows. So we've got box windows, we've got row windows. Now let's hop up here and give ourselves that measurement for every row of boxes. That's called the 1/8 measurement. And we are going to just set our ruler right onto this line as if we were going to draw a row window, but instead I'm going to leave my ruler there and I'm going to add a little dot to represent each one of these windows, and I kind of filled it in. Now I want these windows to be lined up with each other, so I'm going to go right underneath each one of these windows and put my ruler right in the middle, and I'm just going to give myself that line so that I can make sure that they stay in the exact same vertical rows. Now I'm going to line up with my vanishing point and the next mark, and I'm going to put my dots right on that center line, and then I'll stop when I run into my next building. So let's go ahead and we're just adding in the dot windows. We're gonna just right on top of that center line, we're adding dots. And we're only doing it in the spaces that you can see, so if it runs into the other building, you don't need to do it there. We're leaving our ruler there while we draw so that it will help us maintain a flat bottom edge. All right, now let's do our top row for the left side. We're going to just go in and add dots where we think they look like they have nice spacing. And now from this first row, we're gonna give ourselves the lightest center line so that we can know exactly where to draw our next dots to keep them all in order. Now, I'm gonna take my ruler, line it up with this next mark, and I'm going to add these dots on that center line. And I'm gonna just rotate my ruler down to the next section. All right. And we're just continuously going along those lines and adding those dot windows. All right. Perfect. Now let's label this dot. Perfect. So we've got 3 different types of windows. We've got box, row, and dot windows. Thank you so much for watching. Hello and welcome to our next practice for fence post drawing. We are going to begin in a follow along style. So let's go ahead and connect the top of our leading edge to both of our vanishing points. Let's connect the bottom to both of our vanishing points. Now with this practice, we are doing something a little bit differently. We are not making buildings. Instead, I would like for you to draw the other side, and it doesn't have to be this exact measurement. I'm doing just 3/8. So I have a nice size of a fence is what we're making here. Now, we are going to draw this first fence post, and I'm going to add a little oval just right on the top. And I'm going to curve the bottom so that it matches that same curve. Go ahead and do that now. And then we are going to set our ruler down, and let's do a 1/2 inch measurement for, actually, let's do a little bit less. So we're just going, and you can choose any measurement. There's really no, we just don't want it to be too big of a space, no bigger than 1/2 inch. We're gonna overlap with our ruler to make sure it's nice and vertical, not at any slant. And I'm going to make this one slightly skinnier because I made my first one have 3 rows of boxes. This one, I'm going to have 2. Now I'm going to do that same step where I add the oval at the top and the curve at the bottom. Now, this next step is how you can space things to look like they're getting closer and closer and closer together as they get farther away. Now, what we're gonna do here, we are going to connect the top of this first fence post to the bottom of our second fence post with a diagonal line. Let's do that together. Now what we're gonna do next is we're going to take our ruler, we're gonna overlap that line until we reach the very outside edge of this next post. So we want this line to be parallel. That means that it's not at like a weird angle. It's lined right up with that first diagonal line, and I'm going to draw my second diagonal line. Now, one really cool thing about this is it will tell us exactly where our next fence post should begin. So we're going to come in now and we're going to overlap with our previous fence post so we can make sure it's nice and straight compared to the others so that they're not tilted. And we're going to draw a line right where that is touching the bottom edge. And let's draw in the other side of that fence post. And I'm just going to do like 1.5 squares now, getting smaller and smaller as we work our way out. And then we're gonna add that oval and the curve right at the bottom. Now let's do that again to know where our next one will begin. And we're gonna overlap with our ruler. We're gonna make sure that it's overlapping with that diagonal line and that it's touching the top of our next post, and then we draw in our diagonal line. Now that diagonal tells us exactly where our next one's going to begin, but we want to overlap with our ruler to make sure that we're not drawing these at like a weird crooked angle. And now for this one, I'm gonna make it just 1 box wide. And I'm going to come in and add my oval and my curve at the bottom. Let's do that same technique. We're gonna overlap until it's touching the edge or the top of our last post and is at the same diagonal angle. And that tells us right where to put our next post. I'm gonna overlap so it's not at a weird angle. And I'm gonna do just 1 box again so that it's not getting too tiny. Add the oval and the curve at the bottom. Now we're gonna come in, add that next diagonal. So we're making sure it's not at a weird angle. We want to copy that same angle starting right at that first post. Now I am going to draw in my next vertical line, and I'm going to make this one even smaller than 1. And I'm going to add the oval and the curve at the bottom. Now we can probably fit 1 more. We are going to copy that angle. There we go. And we're gonna start our next one right at that edge. A little baby one. It's just a little tiny thing. Oh, it's so cute. Okay, maybe we do have room for 1 more. Okay, let's add that in with our last diagonal, our last fence post going straight up. Oh, it's so small. I love it. Okay, now let's go ahead and erase the lines that we use to help us make these posts. So we want to keep that bottom curve, and we can take out these weird little corners that we got when we were using that technique. So we're just going through, taking out those corners. Let's take out the other side of this. We're just going to do 1 side of our fence post here. And we're just erasing those diagonals in between each of these little babies. And then we're going to add the little wire that goes between them. So we're going to add it from the start, like the very edge of our last one, and it'll draw into the next one. So we're gonna do that for this whole top row. So start at the edge, draw it into the next, like this. So start at the edge, draw it into the next. Start at the edge, draw it into the next. Start at the edge, draw it into the next. And we're just gonna continue until we reach the very back vanishing point. Now let's decide where we want our next row. We're just adding 2 here, so we're going to start at the edge, draw it into the next one, and we want to keep that same line. So keep your ruler there. We start at the edge, draw it into the next one. Start at the edge, draw it into the next one. All right, and there is a beautiful fence, in case you were on the fence. I think these look pretty great. Oh, okay, now we are going to continue on to our next one. For today's practice, we are working on creating a full city corner. Now we are going to get started together, so let's go ahead and start by connecting the top of our leading edge to both vanishing points. Then let's connect the bottom of our leading edge to both vanishing points. All right, now we are going to do the next step, which is to decide our sides. I would like for this first one to be the width of the ruler on the right and a 1/2 inch on the other side. Now we can erase this top line that was leading back. Let's go ahead and do that together. And now we have our open book. So here's our spine and the cover open. We're going to connect the right corner to the left vanishing point. And remember, you don't need to draw the lines all the way back, so you have less to erase. And we're going to connect the left corner to the right vanishing point. And we can erase the excess. Now we are going to go through and let's go ahead and add another building. We need at least a couple more buildings that are beneath the horizon line so that you can see the roofs of at least 3 buildings. So we're going to go through and you're going to draw in the next leading edge, and you can do this with me. We're going to connect the top to both vanishing points. And we're going to connect the bottom to both vanishing points. It is already connected on this side, so let's connect on the left, and then we'll stop when we hit our closest building. And now we get to decide our sides, and for this one you can just choose whichever measurement you would like. And then we erase the excess, and here's our open book. Here's our corners. We are going to connect them to the opposite sides vanishing point. So our right corner goes to the left vanishing point. Left goes to the right. There we go. Now we need at least one more that we can see the rooftop of. So let's maybe add it over on this side. We're going to overlap with our ruler to make sure that we have our lines nice and straight compared to our other buildings. Let's connect the top to both vanishing points. And let's connect the bottom to both vanishing points, but it's already connected on this side, so we only need to do the other side, and we only need to draw it until we hit our first building, because this one's in front. Now let's decide our sides. We're going to overlap with our ruler to make sure that our lines are nice and straight. And now we have our open book. So here are our 2 corners. Let's connect them back to the opposite side's vanishing point. And we'll connect the left to the right. And there we go. Now we are going to continue, and you need to add another 3 buildings minimum. And we are going to go through, and you can draw them above, like in this space between these buildings so that they stop, or you can draw your buildings that are going to be taller on the side. It's totally up to you, but you're going to create another leading edge that's above this horizon line, so taller than this line. Now let's go ahead and connect So we've connected our top to both vanishing points. Now let's connect our bottom edge to both vanishing points. It's already done on this one side, so we have just this other side until we hit the next building. And then we're going to decide our sides, and you get to choose your measurements here. Making some decisions. All right, so here is our tall building. Let's add 2 more, and they can be anywhere where you'd like. We're gonna add our next leading edge, and we're going to connect the top to both vanishing points. All right. Now we don't have to draw the bottom connecting because it's covered up. So our next step becomes deciding our sides. We're gonna overlap with our ruler, make sure it's nice and straight. And one more, and we're gonna maybe make this one a different height. Let's do an even taller one. All right, we decided our leading edge placement. Let's connect the top to both vanishing points. All right, now we're gonna decide our sides. Perfect, so we should have a total of 6 buildings, 3 with roofs, 3 without. Now, our next step, we are gonna go through and you need to give your buildings windows, and you need to use all 3 types of windows, and we're going to give it a measurement that shows that it's getting smaller in space. Now, I'm gonna help you get started with our fence posts slash street lights. So we're gonna add some street lights to this city, but first let's give it a little sidewalk. So we are just going to, let's draw this line going all the way down to the bottom of the paper. And then let's connect the bottom intersection of the paper back to our vanishing points. And this is just gonna represent our sidewalk here. Now let's erase that little measurement we gave ourselves because that's kind of strange looking. All right, now what we're gonna do first, we are going to come in and we're going to draw from this front edge our first street lamp. So we're gonna come in and let's do like 1 of these for the measurement, and we're gonna add in, let's do it going this direction, like a little light that's hanging over the edge, and then we're gonna round out the bottom. Now we are going to decide where we want our next street light, and maybe we'll make these, maybe I don't want it like that. That was kind of a weird looking street light, but you know what I was going for. Anyway, you can make the top of your street light however you would like. Here is another style of street light. So I've got my little street light for my first one drawn here. Now I am going to connect the top of this street light from my first one all the way back to the vanishing point. And we are going to start with our next street light. And I'm going to just overlap with my ruler, and I'm going to draw in the 1 square thickness. I'll probably just kind of keep it kind of consistent until we get smaller. And I'm going to also show myself where the top of that light is so I can make sure that I draw the edges going correctly. So I'll have this like rounded part and the little top with the little cap, and I'll round out the bottom. Okay, now my next step is to draw the diagonal. Let's do this together. We're gonna draw on that diagonal where it touches from the top to the bottom. And now we're going to line up our ruler so it's at that same angle, and we're gonna line it up so it's touching the top of our second post. We're gonna draw on that same diagonal, and that tells us right where to start our next street post. So we're gonna go through and we're going to draw in our street lamps, whichever style you choose, and we're going to have them getting closer and closer together as we reach that vanishing point on the side there. So you must have something that's getting smaller and smaller in your image. And you must use all 3 types of windows. And we are going to spend today and next bell ringer session working on adding your street lamps, your windows, and any other details that you can possibly add to make your city corner as awesome as you possibly can. I hope that this was helpful, that you learned a lot about 2-point perspective, and thank you so much for following along.